Alright, it's Jimmy here. Welcome back to my channel, and look what we got here today. This is the newly released, or rather reissued, Leica M6. And we're gonna unbox it today and also compare it with an array of Leica M film cameras. And I'm gonna go into detail about different aspects of M6 versus all these other M cameras in terms of functionality, design, fit and finish. You know, a lot of people like me cared about the paint job they're using. And this, I heard, is a new formula, which is the black matte paint finish. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. All right, enough chit chat. Let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, this is the new M6 right here. Well, at a glance, it looks exactly like the same camera that they released in the 1980s, and I'm glad they didn't change too much about it. I know a lot of folks might have wished it to be a little bit cheaper, a little bit more affordable, but coming from Leica, I wouldn't expect them to release a film camera that is, you know, at a entry price point range for the majority, because Leica has never been a brand for the majority. And I believe that people who buys into Leicas not only cared about the functionality of the camera, it doesn't provide any fancy functions. It just comes with what is essential and what is needed for taking photos. So next up, I'm going to compare it with some of the very classic Leica M analog cameras, such as the M7, the MP, or even the M4, M2, and M3, and see if this M6 is for you. But first I'm gonna compare it with the original Leica M6. I don't have it here right now, but I've used them before. I've used the titanium edition, I've used the regular, also the later released TTL edition. They're all more or less the same camera. Well, the TTL version, of course, being a little bit taller and has more advanced light meter systems, but for the most part, they feel exactly the same. Well, so how does this new Leica M6 differ from the old one? Well, from the functionality perspective, the really only major difference is the viewfinder, because this is the upgraded viewfinder from the Leica MP. Now, a lot of people who have used the Leica M6 might have experienced that viewfinder whiteout that sometimes you see when there's flares, and I've experienced them personally, and they're very annoying because you basically lose the ability not only to focus but also to frame. And this new viewfinder completely eliminates that issue, so that is a huge plus. Well, aesthetically speaking, they're very similar, but there are a few differences under the hood. First of all, as Leica have advertised, it's using brass instead of zinc for the top plate and bottom plate. That might be very important for someone if they want to see brass on it, they want to see that beautiful patina. But here's a but. Leica have adopted their new black paint formula, which is called the black matte paint finish. It's not exactly like the black chrome they'd be using like on the Leica M10P or Leica M7 here, because these have like a chrome layer underneath, so it's super difficult for them to show any brass. But nonetheless, you can see that on my M7, there is a tiny bit of, I wouldn't say brassing, but a tiny bit of discoloration on the edges where you always rub your fingers against. But for this M6, it feels very similar, at least to the touch, compared to the black chrome finish, but it's definitely different. Would it brass? Would it show that beautiful patina like on some of the old Leica M cameras like this black paint M4 here? Well, it's really hard to tell because this is a newly released camera. It's barely been a few months, and I don't think anybody has used it enough to tell you whether it will brass easily. but just judging from the finish, I don't think it's gonna brush as easy as the traditional glossy Leica black paint, like on the Leica MP here. Aside from that, I don't see much difference between this new M6 and the old M6. Next up, I'm going to compare it with the Leica M7 here. So what are the differences? First of all, from functionality-wise, M7 is actually the only Leica M film camera that comes with automatic shutter. So it's definitely using a different metering system versus on the M6. But aside from that, aesthetically, they're very, very similar. They both have the Leica red dot, and they both use the sort of two-step film winder system and also the updated film rewinder. So if you're in the market for a Leica M and you want to shoot aperture priority mode, then the M7 is probably the only choice you've got here. But a more interesting comparison is the M6 versus the MP. Now, the new M6, to be honest, is just a reskinned version of the MP. Well, even though Leica claimed that they used brand new parts, but personally, I think that's just marketing, and I don't think they're too different from each other because they're using the same viewfinder, right? They're using the same metering system. The circuit board is exactly the same. All what's different is of course, the paint finish is different. The MP comes with the traditional Leica glossy black paint. So if you want that beautiful brassing or patina, this might be your best choice. And also a silver version, but the M6, as of now, it only comes with this new black matte finish paint. If it's gonna brass just like this one and it's got this matte finish, that would be the best of both worlds for a lot of people, because this glossy paint, even though it brass easily, it's also very, very prone to hairline scratches, and it's just really easy to basically leave marks on it. So if you like your cameras to be pristine looking and you just want to see that brassing on spots where it's most used, then rather than having micro scratches everywhere, then this might be a better paint, but I'm not too sure right now because nobody has used it enough to tell you. Aside from the paint job finish difference, there's also the film rewinder and film advanced lever difference, because obviously the MP is using the classic Leica M2, M3 style film advanced lever and film rewind knob, and the M6 of course is using the post M4 style lever and rewind knob. And also the front of these two cameras are a little bit different. One has a red dot and one does not, and one has engraving with Leica on it and the other one has Ernest Lights Wetzlar Germany on it. And the frame line selection lever is also a little bit different in terms of styling. So these two cameras, aside from these aesthetic differences, like I said, they're pretty much the same camera. So whether you pick one or the other really just depends on your personal preference. I would say probably for now, it's easier to get a black paint MP because the M6 is brand new, and like all new Leica products, they sell out pretty quick and it's really hard to get your hands on one. But again, even the MP, I've seen it out of stock in a lot of places and it's not easy to get one these days. So if you really dig the classic black paint finish of the traditional Leica cameras, then you can't go wrong with the MP. Okay, so all these cameras I've talked about, they all have light meters built in. They're a little bit easier to use, but you want something that's purely mechanical, then brand new, you can buy the Leica MA, which I've bought before. I still have it, but I actually wouldn't recommend it too much because any used Leica M2 is just as good, just as functional, and it's a lot cheaper. There's actually advantages to these old Leica cameras like the M2 or M4 because inside their viewfinder, you can only see one frame line at a time instead of a pair of frame lines. Sometimes you might find it a little bit distracting, but these old film cameras, they only come with 35, 50, and 90 frame lines. So if you want to shoot in a more undistracted fashion, then these might be better cameras for you actually. And of course, you can still get the very first Leica, that's the Leica M3. It's still a very good camera, but compared to the M2, M4, it only comes with the 50 and 90 frame lines, which I find a little bit restrictive sometimes. But yeah, if you only cared about 50 and 90, then you can't go wrong with the M3 because it's probably one of the better made Leicas. Leica has offered us so many different choices depending on whether you need a meter, depending on whether you prefer matte black finish or glossy black finish or silver, and depending on whether you prefer the classic advanced lever and film rewind knob or the newer or rather different advanced lever or film rewind knob. So these are the major elements that you should consider. For most of the people, I would say light meter is probably the most important thing because that would impact your shooting style. Because the new M6 is actually running about twice the price of a old M6 as of now, I would probably take the old M6 over all these cameras that I mentioned if you just care about taking photos. Should be, because camera is just a tool, right? I was a little bit not sure about the M6 in the past. I don't get like why it's so popular on the internet. It looks like every YouTuber or photographer that I know that uses Leica are using them. You know, it's not made out of brass and it wouldn't give you this brassing or patina, and it's not the most advanced Leica either because you have the M7 there. But if you look at it purely from a price to performance ratio standpoint, it's probably still one of the best Leica film cameras that you can buy these days. And next up, I'm gonna show you the advanced lever and shutter sound of all these different M cameras. Let's start with the M6. Next up is the MP. Now this is the M7. Okay, next up is the M4. It actually sounds quite a bit smoother to me. Next up is the Leica M2. Sounds pretty nice. The last one is the Leica M3 double stroke. All right, that's it. So to wrap up this video, whether you need the new M6 or not, it really depends on whether you value the two major improvements and you would be willing to pay twice the price for these improvements. I mean, for a lot of people out there, I don't think it's justifiable to get the new M6. You should be fine with your old M6 if you already own one. And if you're gonna buy one, I would probably suggest the old M6 as well. And if you don't need a meter, all the better because you have more choices for you for even cheaper, like the M4, M3, or M2. They're all wonderful rangefinder film cameras and you can't go wrong with any of them, to be honest. So yeah, that's it for today's video. If you're interested in Leica glass, I would definitely recommend you to subscribe to my channel. You can also search up some old reviews from me, and going forward, I will be releasing more lens review videos, and I hope you enjoy this one as well. I'll see you in the next video.